Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of the Financial Freedom for Physicians podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Christopher Liu. And as always, we promote four types of freedom on this podcast. First is financial, second is time, third is location, and fourth is emotional freedom. On today's show, we have Dr. Hisla Bates. Dr. Hisla Bates is a board-certified, Harvard-trained pediatric and adult psychiatrist with over 20 years of experience in the diagnosis and treatment of severe mental illness and managed care. She's had additional training in primary care internal medicine at Yale. Her general psychiatry training was completed at Mount Sinai in New York City. She completed her child and adolescent psychiatry fellowship at Harvard Medical School's Mass General Hospital in the Department of Psychiatry program. She's also studied with Dr. Tal Ben Sharar and is certified in positive psychology from the Whole Being Institute. She has an integrative and holistic approach to the treatment of mental illness, and she uses tools in mindfulness, positive psychology, and the expressive and creative arts working with children and adults. She is the co-chair of the art committee for the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. She is a Parsons School of Design graduate in fashion design and an artist and printmaker who enjoys photography and filmmaking as well. She utilizes all of her skills in her practice as a psychiatrist and coach. And so in today's episode, you're going to hear all about how she developed these multiple streams of income on her side through real estate, as well as how she integrates all of her creative endeavors and pursuits outside of psychiatry as a coach and as an artist. So without much ado, here is Dr. Hisla Bates.
When I was doing my fellowship at Harvard in pediatric psychiatry, I just knew that I wanted to purchase a condominium in Brookline, Massachusetts, because I was told that was where all the great schools were. And raising my daughter as a single mom, I wanted her to, of course, have a wonderful education. So I didn't know a lot about real estate, but I started reading books about it and decided I would purchase my first condominium, and it had to have certain criteria. You know, it had to have an outdoor space, and it had to be in my price range. At that time, it wasn't very high. And so it was a bit of a fixer-upper. And I fixed it up and lived there for probably about 3 to 4 years, and then sold it for, a nice profit. And went on to purchase a second one, and then a third, and similar story. And with each purchase, there was more fixing, so to speak. So I renovated 2 kitchens, 2 bathrooms, and then I moved on to purchasing a home, a single family home. And that was outside of Brookline, and I completely renovated it. So it was a gut rehab. And it was one of the largest undertakings that I've ever done. And lived there for about 5 years. I sold it, and with the equity that I had earned from that home, I essentially had financial freedom.
Okay.
And I was able to pay off my daughter's college tuition, which was well into the 6 figures, and to live, debt free, and start doing a lot of the things that I had put off for a very long time. And so for the past 2.5 years, I have taken lots of courses, um, educated myself in areas of interest in the arts and coaching, in entrepreneurship, and traveled a lot, went to a lot of conferences, just really explored a lot of areas that I hadn't before. And I moved from Massachusetts to New York, which was always a dream of mine too, to come back to New York City and to be here. So real estate, I'm very grateful for. And since I've been in New York, I purchased a duplex, and so my next plan is to start doing some short-term rentals, and I'm looking forward to that experience. And I hope over the years to continue to purchase real estate. And now that my daughter's an adult, I feel like I have more time to invest in that area. So I'm excited about the possibilities when it comes to real estate.
That's amazing. A lot of the physicians that I talk to and that I collaborate with, a lot of them, they say that they told me a very interesting quote, which was, you cannot work your way to financial freedom. You have to invest it. So, a lot of it was through real estate and through equities, but real estate is really highly popular among physicians because it has so many advantages, which you described. So it sounds like your real estate strategy, you just sort of just over time, it's not like you just delved right in. You did it on the side. You learned a little bit about renovation and improvements, and you just sort of bought slowly, accumulated your wealth,
Yeah.
and then you sold it, and it helped you to get out of debt, help pay for your daughter's college education, which
Yeah.
is really interesting. So
Yeah, well, I think, the reason why I did it slowly was, number one, I was a single mom and I had just finished my fellowship. I don't come from a family that, has had resources or money to help me. So I had
uh,
to do it all on my own.
yeah.
And and trying to raise a child and, be a real estate investor. Honestly, at the time, I didn't know how to do it other than kind of the slow boat, the slow method. And
uh,
I'm still kind of doing it that way, but I feel like, um, you know, I like to be in control. And
uh,
so, I've learned a lot along the way and I just love it. So I'm constantly looking at real estate.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, for the listeners out there, you hear all these stories. They became millionaire in less than a year, and but there's very like I read a good book which was just slowly accumulate your wealth over time, and usually at the end of 8 or 9 or 10 years, you will have accumulated your. So you don't have to do it all in one sprint. So
Yeah.
and you can do it in your spare time. A lot of physicians, they invest on the weekends, they look at deals at night after their kids are asleep. So
Mhm.
there's so many different timelines, different strategies. So
Yeah.
and now you're doing a lot of creative things. Looks like you're doing art. You're doing a lot of creative design. You're involved in the arts, and
Mhm.
then you're also coaching. So tell us more how financial freedom allows you to do different things.
Well, before I had financial freedom, I, before I had financial freedom, I was working 70, 80 hours a week. I was working like a dog, like
Uh-huh.
everybody else, right, in medicine.
Yeah.
And and I was pretty miserable,
Uh-huh.
actually. And I had this desire to paint and and just go back into the arts in some way, because I had pushed all of that aside, through my training and residency. I always felt like I never had enough time to do it.
Uh-huh. Exactly.
And and I started buying the art of other artists,
Uh-huh.
and just admiring their work. I actually moved. There was a stint in there where I didn't talk about much. I moved to Arizona, and I was planning on having an art studio in my, casita, and I had this dream of having this art studio and living in Arizona and having a simpler life, so to speak. But then I went to Arizona and it wasn't so simple. And I had no community and no network. And so I quickly moved back to Boston. And and I found when I moved back to Boston an art community, a community of other painters and printmakers and so on. And I stopped buying the art of other artists because my daughter said to me, "Mom, I think you can do that. I think you can do, the art that I was about to buy, which was significant." And I started painting and printmaking. And it all felt very new to me because I was a fashion designer. I know how to do fashion illustration, but I'd never really had any experience with oil paint and canvas. And so that was all new for me. And I felt, very vulnerable. But over time, I became more comfortable with it. And I dedicated an evening a week to going to the studio. And we all met as a group. There were about 10 of us. Not everyone was, it was a mix of people. And I was the only physician there. But I made sure that I went on a weekly basis. And that really nourished me and nurtured me in a way. And I really started to feel more joyful again, and I just think I became a better parent and a better physician because I felt more connected to myself and to everything else. So I then went on to submit my artwork to juried shows, got into a few juried shows, the Boston Printmakers Biennial, which is a big printmakers show in 2011.
Oh,
And yeah, and selling my work. And so this part of me, this artistic part of me just seemed to blossom during that period of time.
that's so amazing. I'm not sure if you've heard of Dr. Susie Sharp or
I
Dr.
have.
Yeah, and I interviewed her on my podcast, and also Dr. Peju Samoyan. She's up on the East Coast. She's also an artist, but
Oh, well,
yeah,
I'll have to listen to it. I interviewed Susie Sharp as well,
okay,
and
nice.
um, yeah, and her story, of course, is very fascinating. And my podcast is actually based around creatives
Yeah,
and physicians who are using the arts
yeah.
in ways to heal themselves.
That
So,
you mentioned so many interesting things, such as for example, being vulnerable, and it's because medicine doesn't allow you to be
yes,
vulnerable. You have to, you have to have it's very what I call it's like an assembly line. Um
yeah,
and you're not allowed to be creative. And then
right.
but the thing is, like, as humans, we're creative beings, and we're creative creatures. So, and I also loved your reference to just showing up, just being consistent, and just
Yeah.
when I started blogging, nobody listened, but it was more of a creative outlet for me. And it's since grown, and a lot of people are interested in what you write about. And whether or not you make money off of it or monetize it, that it's doing it for the just sake of doing it. So yeah. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of people would be interested in contacting you or meeting you. So what's the best way to get in touch with you, follow you on social media?
Well, one way is to go to my website, which is
Uh, uh,
www.drhislamd.com. And that's my name, Dr. Isla Bates,
uh,
MD.com. and get on my mailing list.
Yeah.
I don't email people, very often, so you won't be bombarded with tons of email. Because I don't like email very much. I'm also on Instagram quite a bit and
Oh, okay.
Clubhouse.
Oh, Clubhouse.
So
Okay.
yeah, so that's another way to get in touch with me.
Okay.
And yeah, and Facebook. I started a Facebook group for physicians and healers who are interested in the arts.
Uh-huh.
And you can sign up through my Instagram. Just tap on the bio and you'll see a link to the Facebook group.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, reach out to me. I love speaking to artists. I love also speaking about real estate,
Yeah.
and happy to share.
Yeah, you've given such an incredible story, and you've talked so much about creativity. What's one last piece of advice for the listeners to take away for the show?
Well, I'd like to say that, tap into your creativity if you have any kind of yearning to paint or to draw, that you will feel much more connected to yourself and your patients. It'll make your life much more joyful. And, don't leave parts of yourself out because you want to focus only on medicine. It's just open yourself up, become
Uh,
vulnerable, and enjoy, have fun.
those are beautiful parting words of advice. So thanks so much for your time on the show, and we look forward to hearing about your future successes.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure meeting you and speaking with you, Dr. Liu.